I've reached my limit. I hate to ask, but can I crash at your place for a few days?
Dad had been kicked out of the family home by my sisters and Mom, and now he stood at my doorstep. Seeing Dad, who had always been so strong, talk about reaching his limit, I blamed myself. "I'm sorry, Dad." In that moment, as I tried to apologize for my inability to help alleviate his suffering, my husband Ethan spoke up.
"Let's live with your father-in-law."
"Are you sure?" I turned to Ethan, surprise evident in my voice. Dad, too, could barely hide his shock, his eyes wide open. "My name is Emily. I'm 26 years old. Ethan and I started dating in college, and we got married 2 years ago. Our days are filled with a fulfilling work-life balance. Ethan is my best supporter, always by my side. I never thought I'd find someone who gives me such confidence, let alone marry them. As the youngest of 3 sisters, I grew up in an environment where I could never go against my mom and my sisters. I was always the last one in line for attention from Mom, and also the lowest in rank among my sisters. Every time I voiced an opinion, sharp words would come flying back at me. Over time, I stopped expressing myself and started to suppress my feelings. I bore the treatment of being treated like a servant by my mom and my sisters without complaining. "I wanted a boy. When I found out you were another girl, I was so disgusted. Grace and Ashley are enough for girls. You're an unwanted child, and yet here you are in this house. If you want to stay here, you have to work." Mom often belittled me like this. Even if you tell me that, how many times have I swallowed my words, the ones I wanted to say back to her? By the time I entered elementary and middle school, I was in charge of most of the household chores, from preparing meals and doing laundry to getting the bath ready. People around me would praise me, saying, "That's impressive," or "You're so responsible." But I only found joy in that at first. "It's a given that you do all these things," Mom would say with no words of thanks or praise. Instead, I was constantly being reprimanded for my cooking or the way I folded the laundry. The one who kept me going through all this was Dad. Unlike Mom and my sisters, Dad loved me and respected me. As the only man in the family, Dad was not well liked by Mom and my sisters, and his power within the family was as low as mine. But he always stood up for me. "I'm sorry, Emily. You always have to put up with so much. If only we could all live in harmony." Dad would often hold me tight and say these things. Despite his early mornings and late nights for work, Dad would always spend his days off with me, fulfilling Mom and my sister's demands together. And he always listened to my feelings and accepted my words. But my mom and her cohorts didn't seem to like that. "There's no one to protect you today," they'd tell me, pushing more chores onto me. They'd hurl harsh words at Dad too, such as, "For a man, low income." And my sisters would follow their lead, laughing and saying, "Disgusting!" and "Don't open your mouth." So no matter how much Dad tried to be a pillar of support, I was becoming increasingly frail. Noticing my distress, Dad said something to me when I entered high school. "Emily, study as much as you can, then go to college. Leave this house and live on your own. You, Emily, have so many possibilities. There's no need to endure and stay in this house forever. I want you to live your life," my father urged me. At his words, I felt both elated and anxious. At the time, my eldest sister Grace, 6 years older than me, was attending a private university. Ashley, 4 years older, was at a vocational school. Mom would often ridicule Dad for his low income and tell me, We're poor because he doesn't bring in money, so you should start working once you graduate from high school. Because of this, I believed our family was financially struggling. Despite that, I worried if Dad was pushing himself too hard, telling me to go to college and live on my own. But Dad insisted there's no need to worry about money.
I feel responsible for making you suffer so much. That's why I don't want you to endure any longer.
Dad,
this is a request from your father. You don't have to worry about anything. Just go to the university you want, study what you want. Find what you love to do. I want you to lead a happy life to make up for the hardship you've been through.
I could feel his strong resolve as he gripped my shoulder, his eyes moist with tears. From then on, I devoted myself to the studies I had neglected. Juggling the overbearing instructions from my mom and sisters, I spent all my remaining time studying at my desk. My hard work paid off, and I was accepted into a university. Dad and I embraced each other, sharing the joy of my acceptance. I kept it a secret from Mom and my sisters until the last minute, only announcing my plans to go to college and live alone on the day I was moving. At that time, Grace had already moved out and was living on her own, leaving only Mom and Ashley at home, who showered me with shouts of rage. I endured their harsh words until the end, finally breaking free from them. I kept my new mobile phone, a gift from Dad, a secret, not telling them which university I was going to or where I was going to live. Though I stayed in touch with Dad, I started a life without any involvement with my mom or my sisters. But just because I escaped from them didn't mean my university life was smooth sailing. I wasn't used to speaking my mind, and as a timid person, I was somewhat invisible in my department, unable to make friends. Then, Ethan reached out to me.
What do you think, Emily?
I was surprised when Ethan, the bright and central figure of the group, spoke to me. I was already uncomfortable speaking in front of people, and being put on the spot by him left me speechless. But Ethan pressed me.
You have thoughts, right? Share them. We won't know unless you say something.
A person who is pushy and doesn't consider other people's feelings. I initially thought of Ethan as pushy and inconsiderate. But as time passed, I came to see the kindness in Ethan, how he respected people's opinions. Thanks to Ethan, I started to make friends. Before long, I found myself drawn to Ethan, and by our third year, our relationship had progressed to dating. When I started dating Ethan, Dad excitedly congratulated us. And when I found a job, when Ethan and I decided to move in together, and when we decided to get married, Dad celebrated my happiness as if it was his own. But I had always been worried about Dad. Since starting university, I hadn't been home and hadn't seen Dad even once. We stayed in touch, but I was still concerned. Dad was living at that place with Mom and the others. I had no doubt he was still enduring snide comments from Mom and Ashley, still spending his days under their domineering instructions. Dad, I'm happy today because of you. Back then, I was powerless and always needed your help. But things have changed. I'm working now and I'm married. I have someone who supports me. So now it's my turn to help you. Please let me know if you're in any trouble. When I announced my marriage, I told him that. Having learned the importance of expressing my feelings to others since being with Ethan, I was finally able to put into words what I had never been able to tell Dad before.
Thank you.
Dad replied that way, but until now, 2 years later, Dad never asked me for help. Furthermore, recently, I heard that Grace, who was supposed to be living alone, quit her job and returned to our parents' house. My worry for Dad had only increased. Then one day, the doorbell rang just as I was confiding in Ethan about how worried I was about Dad. December was almost over, and even though it wasn't even 4 p.m., it was already getting dark outside. We had no scheduled deliveries, so we were surprised when we looked at the screen of the intercom. The person shown by the camera was none other than Dad. I rushed to the front door and opened it. Seeing Dad for the first time in 8 years, his cheeks were hollowed out, and there was more white than black in his hair. He looked visibly unwell. I instinctively knew that his sudden visit without any notice wasn't for a casual reason. "Dad, what's happened? Please come inside. It must be cold outside." Dad was wearing trousers and a long-sleeve shirt, even in December. This seemed too thin. Why would he be outside dressed like that? But the reason was revealed from Dad's mouth. Dad was kicked out of the house by Mom and the others.
"They told me to go buy dessert, so I went to the nearby convenience store. But when I came back, the house was locked. I asked them to open up, but they told me not to come back and didn't let me in."
What?
"I left the house without my phone or jacket, but I waited for several hours and they didn't seem to let me in."
As Dad rubbed his cold body, he told us about what happened that day. I quickly made some hot tea and gave it to Dad. Dad held the cup of tea with both hands to get warm and muttered softly,
"I might not be able to go back to that house again."
Why?
"Ever since Grace came back, Mom and the others' attitude got even worse. I was feeling at my limits too, and then they did this to me. I don't even have the energy to go back. I think I should look for a monthly apartment and think about what to do in the future. I'm sorry, but could I stay here for a few days? I'll leave as soon as I find an apartment."
I was worried, but I hadn't imagined it was this bad. Dad, who never complained before, was talking about his limits? "I'm sorry, Dad." I was about to apologize to Dad for knowing about his troubles and not being able to do anything when
"Let's live with your father."
Ethan raised his voice. "Are you sure?" I turned to my husband in surprise. Dad, too, unable to hide his surprise, opened his eyes wide.
"Sorry for being blunt, especially since we just met, but your father-in-law doesn't look too healthy. I think it would be best if we lived together to help him recover. Everything else can be figured out later, of course, only if he's okay with this."
Ethan's suggestion left Dad and I with nothing but gratitude. And so our new life as a trio began. Just a few days after Dad moved in, our doorbell rang again. All three of us were stunned by the figures displayed on the intercom screen. Mom and my sisters were standing there. Why here? Shocked and bitter past memories made my breath hitch. But I had to face them. I didn't know what they would do next. In a panic, I opened the door. "Wow, I didn't expect you to be living in such a fancy place. I thought you were scraping by in some rundown apartment." Hearing Mom's voice after such a long time, all I could feel was resentment. "Why are you here?" "Your father's mobile had your address in it. I had no idea Emily even had a mobile phone." "Why would you give him your contact info but not us? Are you honoring the wrong person?" Just as before, Grace arrogantly looked down at me. After Mom's words, seeing her like this, Mom smiled satisfied and spoke again. "Well, never mind. Is your father here? We're having some trouble without him." Even though she said they were in trouble, there were no signs of actual distress. All three of them were smirking. "In trouble? But you're the ones who kicked him out." "You've become quite sassy, haven't you? So he is here. Move aside." "No," I yelled at Mom and her group. Mom's typical overbearing tone and her condescending remarks about me fueled my irritation. It would have been impossible in the past, but I had changed, all thanks to Ethan. However, Mom's irritation became apparent as she raised her voice. "When did I ever give you permission to talk back? Just move."
You can't even listen to what I say.
I'm not the same person I used to be. I won't be pushed around by you, Mom. I refused firmly. Ethan came up beside me, trying to shoo Mom and the others away. Despite our efforts, Mom and her group wouldn't leave. We repeated, "Move," and "No," until tired of the ordeal or maybe having given up. Mom was the one to break first.
"That's enough. I don't want to hear any more from you. If you won't move, can you at least let us know when the money will be deposited in our account? It's really annoying that all you can do is put money in, and you can't even do that." I was speechless at Mom's words. How did she think she's been able to live without working? My anger reached its peak. "From now on, Dad will be living with us. Dad and I will no longer be pushed around by you guys. Please divorce Dad and stop causing him pain." As I couldn't hold back my words any longer, the response from my mom was something I hadn't anticipated. "Don't make it sound like I'm the bad guy. I've been kind enough to stay as a family with a man like him who is low income and can't do a thing. You should be thanking me." "What?" "You're just like your dad, a low-income loser, acting high and mighty, but in the end, all you're doing is licking each other's wounds." I felt like I was about to lose control at Mom's words. I was on the verge of raising my voice, of lashing out, but then my husband spoke. "Emily works hard. She's a supervisor, earning a decent wage. I'd appreciate it if you didn't belittle us with comments about licking wounds."
As my husband stared down Mom, she retorted,
"Don't you dare talk back to me. You're an outsider, so stay quiet."
That's when Mom turned on Ethan. Dad, who should have been in the living room, was suddenly at my side, addressing Mom.
"I've heard enough. We can't impose on Emily and Ethan anymore. Let's get a divorce."
"Dad?" At Dad's words, my sisters chimed in with, "That's fine. That's fine. We don't need a creepy guy like you," one voice called out. Emboldened by my sisters, Mom agreed.
"That's fine by me."
I was dumbfounded by how quickly things had been resolved, but the peace didn't last long.
"But there's one condition. Hand over that house to me, then I'll give you your divorce."
Mom laid out her demand. Just how greedy could this woman be? But Dad quickly agreed to Mom's demand. "Dad, are you sure?" I was shocked, but Dad turned to me and smiled.
"If that's all it takes to get a divorce, it's a small price to pay."
He then turned back to Mom, his face serious.
"I'll do as you ask. Leave for today. I'll come over tomorrow."
With that, Dad sent Mom and my sisters home. They continued to belittle me until the end, but I didn't care. I felt guilty for pushing a divorce and causing Dad to lose his home. But Dad patted my shoulder.
"It's not your fault, Emily. In fact, I'm glad you spoke up."
The next day, Dad went back home one last time with the divorce papers. He made Mom fill out the divorce application, handled some paperwork, and packed his belongings. When Dad came back from our family home, he looked somehow lighter. It was sad to see the house go to Mom and my sisters, but if Dad felt relieved, I was okay with it. A few months later, Dad told me what had happened to Mom and my sisters. They had taken the family home as part of the divorce settlement and planned to live lavishly by selling it. However, the house was old. The location wasn't great. They couldn't sell the house or land for much, and demolition costs ate into the proceeds. In the end, they were left with almost nothing. Now, without a home or savings, Mom didn't work. Neither did Grace or Ashley have stable jobs. And with Dad gone, the same Dad they ridiculed for his low income status while they leaned on him for living expenses, the trio found themselves in dire straits. They tried seeking help, showed up at our house several times, but we never opened the door to them. Still, they refused to give up. causing commotion at the front porch. I finally had to tell them through the intercom, "If you make any more noise, I'll call the cops." That sent them packing. Now it seems they're barely managing, renting an apartment that's too cramped for 3. Even Mom, who never worked before, was seemingly forced to get a job. That's how desperate they were. Despite all the times they made fun of Dad and I as a trio, they now seem to be constantly bickering among themselves. They appear to be blaming each other for their current circumstances. People rarely change. With neither Dad nor me around anymore, the ones they used to ridicule, they can't help but find someone else to target. It seems they're destined to lead lives filled with both physical and emotional poverty. Meanwhile, our lives have taken the polar opposite trajectory. Despite all their mockery about Dad being low income, he had actually been trading stocks for years, amassing a fortune. We only learned about this after the divorce was finalized. Dad feared that if any information leaked out, the trio would try to seize his assets, so he had decided not to mention it until the divorce was over. That's probably why he didn't mind giving up the family home. Now we're living comfortably in a new house that Dad built with his wealth. He quit his job to focus on his stocks. My husband and I have jobs too, so we're not struggling financially. We support each other while each maintaining our own financial independence. We hope to build the loving family that we couldn't have when we were young, from here on out.
I'm sorry for the unappealing meal my unattractive daughter-in-law has prepared. My mother-in-law scolded me in front of our relatives during my father-in-law's 60th birthday celebration. She's not only unattractive, but also inept. I'm truly ashamed. What a disaster. Where was my dependable husband, who always cared for me? Was he tending to our daughter? He was nowhere to be found. As soon as I arrived at my in-laws' house, feeling fit as a fiddle, my mother-in-law suddenly complained of chronic back pain and became unable to move as the party preparation began. She delegated all the preparation work to me. Later, she continued to belittle me in front of our gathered relatives who were there to celebrate my father-in-law. She turned the once lively and cheerful mood into something resembling a wake. Then, my father-in-law stood up and broke the silence.
"Is that all you have to say?"
No one could have foreseen the series of unimaginable events that this single phrase would trigger. I'm Sarah, and I'm 35 years old. 6 years ago, I married my husband, Michael, who is 3 years younger than me. We also have a 5-year-old daughter. My mother-in-law seemed displeased with me since I was older than her son. Every time we visited her house during New Year's, Memorial Day, or national holidays, she'd make sarcastic remarks at me in my husband's absence. I wish I had a younger, vibrant, and cuter daughter-in-law, not a woman full of age spots like you. Do I really look that old? Yes, very! Don't you see your own face in the mirror every day? It does hurt to be criticized about your appearance, especially as a woman. But I thought it was better not to make a big deal of it since we had only met a few times a year. However, this seemed to irritate her even more and she began to use more harsh words. You're quite thick-skinned for an old woman. You don't get upset no matter what I say. I find it annoying that you don't show a shred of modesty. Yeah. What should I say to my mother-in-law, who only says things that make me feel at a loss for words? In front of my husband, she hides her true dark nature and speaks kind words to me. My husband seems to have no idea that I'm being mistreated by her. But if I were to accidentally vent my frustrations, I would likely be the one blamed, so I've always held back. Visiting the house with my mother-in-law present felt truly burdensome. However, it was a significant celebration for my kind father-in-law's 60th birthday. Many relatives were gathering, and we were having a grand event, so I decided to attend. My father-in-law is a quiet man who doesn't talk much, but he wraps me in his subtle kindness. When I'm feeling down because of my mother-in-law's nasty words, he gently approaches me and speaks to me.
"Sarah, if you're having a hard time, feel free to tell me. If it's alright, I'd like to be there for you."
I wonder if my father-in-law realized that I was being harassed by my mother-in-law. But to protect me from further harassment behind the scenes, he consciously refrained from openly supporting me. To celebrate such a warm-hearted father-in-law, Our family left early in the morning and drove 3 hours to our in-laws' house. I was feeling a bit under the weather with the low-grade fever and lingering fatigue, so my husband Michael took it upon himself to do all the driving. On reaching my in-laws' place, my mother-in-law stepped lightly out of the front door with a gleeful expression. "Well, well, look who's here. It's been a while, Michael. You should show your face more often. Oh dear, you look tired."
Well, I've been driving non-stop, so it can't be helped.
"I see. You've worked hard. I'll get the bed ready right away. Why don't you go rest in the back room?"
I think I'll take you up on that. Sarah, you should get a rest too. You've been taking care of the kid in the car. You must be tired. Besides, you don't seem well.
"Oh dear, Michael. You didn't know? I called Sarah yesterday and we planned to go shopping together for the 60th birthday celebration. You go and rest. Sarah, once you've put the luggage at the entrance, we'll head out." Of course, no such communication had come, and I don't remember making any such shopping promise. Having looked after our energetic 5-year-old daughter, I'm exhausted, and since I'm not feeling well, I'd like to rest too.
Since Sarah's not feeling well, let her rest. The shopping can be done by you.
"But it's your father's big celebration. I want to choose the best ingredients with Sarah. Sarah, you'll keep your promise with me, right?" She certainly knows how to make a good excuse. Without giving me a chance to refuse after setting down the luggage, she forcefully pulled me by the arm and shoved me back into the car we had just gotten out of. Then, glaring at me fiercely, she snapped, "I don't think you need time to rest." However, right after that, she switched her expression to a big smile and loudly said, "Thank you for driving the car. I'm so happy." Knowing my mother-in-law, if I opposed her now, it would surely make the whole day a disaster. I reluctantly got into the driver's seat. "I'm fine, so Michael, you just rest. I'll go shopping with mother-in-law." As I tried to hand over our daughter to Michael, mother-in-law took my daughter from my arms and swiftly seated her in the child seat, quickly closing the door. "Looking after the child is a mother's duty. Well, Michael, we're off." Once she got into the passenger seat, her sweet tone from before completely changed as she started berating me. "So, you can't even look after your child properly? Stop using Michael for your convenience. You're just an incompetent daughter-in-law who's only aged." What was terrifying was that she maintained a sweet facade since Michael was still nearby. Oblivious to all this, Michael waved us goodbye. I drove my unfamiliar husband's car toward a large supermarket. Of course, there was no way mother-in-law would stay quiet during the drive, and she started lecturing me right away. "I'll make you regret lazing around while making my son drive." "Mother-in-law, please don't say such scary things. I've been feeling feverish and fatigued since this morning." "Your poor health is due to your bad management. Also, your crow's feet have increased, and the spots on your cheeks have darkened. I can't even bear to look, and your skin has lost its elasticity." I had lost all my energy to respond to her harsh words, and barely managed to arrive at the supermarket, nodding along the way. This is really exhausting. I wonder how all the other daughter-in-laws in the world manage to endure such treatment from their mothers-in-law. My high-spirited mother-in-law, without even a word of thanks, jumped out of the car and swiftly handed me 2 shopping carts. "You're so slow. Get a move on." When I tried to avoid the crowds, she swiftly moved forward, filling the shopping basket with luxury foods like USDA prime beef, crab, salmon roe, and melons. And then she started to add in things clearly not needed for the day. "Mother-in-law, do we need these urgently?" I asked. "We're bulk buying, so we don't have to come to the supermarket again and again. You should know that without being told," she replied. Feeling helpless, I let her do as she pleased. By the time we finished shopping, the 2 baskets were piled high. "We're going to check out. Hurry up. Stop dilly-dallying." Despite her rush, when it came time to pay at the counter, my mother-in-law showed no intention of taking out her wallet. "Mother-in-law, the payment," I began, but with her hands folded behind her, she didn't move an inch. When I asked for the money again, she glared at me and got angry. "You should pay for everything." Excuse me?" I stammered. "As a wife, it's your duty to entertain your husband's father. Don't be stingy and just pay." I ended up having to pay a total of $300 at the cash register to avoid making a scene. Not having any cash on me, I paid with my credit card. As a part-time worker trying to raise a child, this was a significant blow to my finances. And to make matters worse, I had brought $300 as a birthday gift for my father-in-law's 60th birthday, but I couldn't use that. The expense meant I would have to cut back even more on our living costs in the future, and the burden that had already been heavy just became even heavier. I wonder how I should tell this to Michael. If I report this, mother-in-law might cause a fuss. During the car ride home, my mother-in-law kept hurling insults at me. It was almost impressive how many different insults she could come up with. By the time we arrived home, my husband was still asleep, probably due to exhaustion. Upon seeing this, my mother-in-law smiled slyly and began to take advantage of me. After you put away the groceries, go weed the garden right away. Please, can I rest a bit? You have no right to defy your mother-in-law. This is the consequence for making Michael drive alone. So this is what you meant by making me regret, I murmured. If you have time to move your mouth, just go and move your hands. Hurry up, we're short on time. After weeding, clean the bathroom and the toilet. Despite the unfairness of the situation, I had no choice but to endure it for the day. I weeded the garden and then cleaned the grimy, yellow-stained bathroom and toilet, thinking that once the 60th birthday celebration was over, I wouldn't have to see my mother-in-law for a while. My husband woke up just as I had finished cleaning and looked surprised to see me.
Sarah, are you okay? If you're not feeling well, don't overwork yourself. Take a break now.
Thank you. I'll take you up on that offer. Ouch! That hurts! Just as I was about to lie down, my mother-in-law suddenly let out a loud yell, clutching her back. Although she had been lively just moments before, she started complaining about sudden back pain. My mother-in-law, who always presents a gentle demeanor in front of my husband, suddenly let out a weak voice. This is troublesome. My back hurts so much, I can't do anything. My chronic back pain has flared up again. I won't be able to cook before the relatives gather. Sarah, you're my only hope. But oh, what should I do? As much as her sorrowful demeanor seemed a bit staged, if her chronic back pain was genuine, then it would indeed be impossible for her to stand in the kitchen. Reluctantly, I pushed my weary body, asked my husband to look after our daughter, and started cooking.
Sarah, are you sure you're okay?
I'm fine. I always cook, remember? To my husband, I put up a brave front, but my body was already fatigued. Yet, it was an important day for my father-in-law. I felt that I couldn't afford to take a break. My head is spinning, and somehow the smell of food is making me sick. But I have to keep going for my father-in-law. After I managed to finish cooking, my father-in-law came into the kitchen to check on me.
You've worked hard. Thank you for preparing all this food.
Not at all. It's for you. Please enjoy it later. After that, the relatives started gathering one after another. Everyone wished my father-in-law well, creating a lively atmosphere. As we finished the toast and were about to start eating, my mother-in-law started saying something shocking. I'm sorry, everyone, but due to my chronic back pain flaring up on this important birthday celebration, the food was all cooked by my daughter-in-law. I apologize for the unappetizing food made by my unattractive daughter-in-law. Both my father-in-law and husband froze at my mother-in-law's sudden outburst. My daughter-in-law is not only unattractive, but she's also clumsy, a total failure. It's truly pitiful. Ouch! My mother-in-law exaggeratedly rubbed her back, continuing to disparage me. She's so clumsy that without my support, she can't do anything. I wonder if she can even take care of her own child. I'm so worried about whether Michael can manage with such a woman as his wife. What was supposed to be a festive atmosphere quickly turned gloomy, resembling more of a wake than a celebration. My usually supportive husband, who was supposed to be looking after our daughter, was nowhere to be found. At that moment, my father-in-law, who had been sitting quietly, suddenly stood up. Is that all you wanted to say? Huh? Seems like it. Maybe we should kick out the useless one then. Following his words, my husband entered the room, holding our daughter in a suitcase. His face was unusually stern.
Dad, as you said, I've packed her stuff.
My mother-in-law smiled at the sight, seemingly pleased. Sarah, looks like you're getting kicked out. Hehehe. But to her surprise, my husband handed the suitcase to her. What? My father-in-law's booming voice added the final blow. Take that and get out of this house right away! Although she seemed unable to comprehend what was happening, my mother-in-law quickly understood the situation. Why should I be the one kicked out? It's Sarah who's useless. The bathroom is always covered in mold, the toilet left dirty, and you call Sarah useless when you barely cook anything? Not to mention how harshly you've been treating her. I've had enough. It's the mother-in-law's duty to discipline the daughter-in-law. I was only pointing out her shortcomings. Discipline? What era do you think we're living in? Realizing that an angry father-in-law, eyebrows raised, wouldn't take her side. Mother-in-law turned to her usual theatrics and began crying to my husband. Michael, don't misunderstand. We might need to take care of your father someday, right? So, I was teaching Sarah how to be a good wife. As tough as that was.
Take care of him? That's a laugh. I won't be fooled by you anymore. You've just been bullying Sarah. Even today, despite feeling unwell, she came along to celebrate Dad's 60th birthday.
Sarah volunteered to celebrate, didn't she?
Don't lie. You also made her pay for the groceries, didn't you? I found a receipt from today in her bag when she was trying to take out candies for our daughter. It shows that Sarah paid with her credit card.
I just asked her to pay because I didn't have any cash on hand. I was planning to pay her back, honestly.
Really? If I hadn't noticed, you would have just kept quiet. I've turned a blind eye to the common mother-in-law and daughter-in-law issues, but you're going too far. I'm fed up with living with a spiteful old woman.
Seeing my husband and father-in-law turn away from her, mother-in-law began to blame me with all her usual acting prowess, tears streaming down her face. So, Sarah has been making false accusations about me. That's terrible. You're all making me the villain. No, I haven't said anything, but it's a fact that you've been bullying me, isn't it? For the sake of father-in-law and my husband, who had gone to great lengths for me, I gathered the courage and spoke the truth for the first time. I would no longer let mother-in-law have her way.
That's right. We heard about it from Mia. We also know about the nasty comments you made about Sarah at the supermarket and in the car. Afterwards, you made Sarah do all the weeding and cleaning the bathroom and the toilet.
Yeah, Grandma was mean to Mommy. She made her clean a lot of places. You can't trust what a child says. Mia doesn't lie. Let's check the dash cam footage. That should clear everything up. Michael, could you do that?
Good idea, Sarah. I'll do that right away.
What is that? Ignoring his mother's question, Michael went to the car parked outside, started the engine, and began playing the dashcam footage. The latest device, which can also record the inside of the car, was installed, so even facial expressions were clear.
Ah, it's showing. She was saying these things. I'm shocked. Everyone, come over here and watch this.
Relatives who had followed to see what was happening all checked the footage. Upon viewing, they began to comment.
This is terrible indeed.
Wow, this is the worst. Mother-in-law, who had stayed in the house insisting she wasn't at fault, began to panic as the atmosphere grew tense and ran barefoot toward the car. Everyone was taken aback by her swift movements, despite her supposed back pain. So, the back pain was just an act then. I'm all better now. After casually responding to my words, she tried to awkwardly seat herself in the driver's seat to turn off the dash cam. But she was firmly held by my father-in-law, making it impossible for her to move. Stop this right now, don't look at them! But it was too late. No amount of yelling could help her. With all her misdeeds exposed, my mother-in-law, stunned and speechless, sank down helplessly. That's when my father-in-law casually handed her a single piece of paper.
I filled in my part. You just need to write your part and submit it.
What? Isn't this a divorce form?
I had it prepared just in case. I never thought I'd have to use it. Don't ever cross my doorstep again.
Wait a minute. I promise to stop harassing Sarah. Please forgive me. The sight of my mother-in-law begging for forgiveness with tears in her eyes was truly pitiful. But this too was likely an act. I firmly pushed my mother-in-law away. You let the cat out of the bag about bullying your daughter-in-law at the end. I will never forgive you. You might want to leave before the neighbors gather around. Oh no, this is terrible. The commotion attracted the attention of neighbors who watched from a distance. Perhaps not wanting to make a scene, she promptly took the divorce form and suitcase, and her supposed back pain was nowhere to be found. She rushed out of the garden. The villain had been dealt with, but I returned home filled with guilt. I'm sorry for all this during your 60th birthday celebration, Dad. When I earnestly apologized, he responded,
Sarah, you did nothing wrong. I'm sorry for all the trouble we've caused. Let's start over.
My father-in-law smiled. The relatives also watched with kind expressions. Later, they praised the dishes I had prepared and ate heartily. At that moment, all the fatigue seemed to fly away. Thus, we celebrated my father-in-law's 60th birthday in a grand manner. My mother-in-law, who was initially reluctant to agree to the divorce, eventually agreed, and they divorced amicably. It was also revealed that she had been misappropriating funds from my father-in-law's account, and she was ordered to repay $10,000 that she had spent recklessly. Unable to find work due to her lack of experience, she now works as a janitor in an office building late at night. With barely any money left, she lives in a rundown apartment that's seen better days. On the other hand, I found out that I was pregnant with my second child. It seemed that the feeling of discomfort I had earlier was due to my pregnancy. 5 months have passed since then, and my husband Michael has been very caring. The ultrasound revealed that we're expecting a boy. Both Michael and my father-in-law are looking forward to his arrival. Already excited, my father-in-law sent over blue baby clothes. My adorable daughter is overjoyed at the thought of having a younger brother and practices taking care of a baby with her dolls every day. Watching her gives me immense happiness.